Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Wow, that was something else. I got behind the microphone and connected a couple minutes ago where I tried to connect and nothing was happening. Nothing. And I looked at the mixer and I thought, what's going on? Now, there are over 100 dials, switches, and buttons on the mixer that I'm using for this broadcast. And I realized that two of these tiny, tiny push-button switches were in the wrong place. And they were in the up position. So you push it once, it goes down. You push it again, it comes up. And I know what happened. I think one of our 5 cats decided to look out the window and step on the mixer and reconfigure the mixer. So up until 5 seconds before broadcast, I was not connected. So I called with the telephone, and I talked to Jason, and I asked him if he would let Rich know that I cannot connect. Everything's fine, except I can't connect to GCN. And he said, yeah. And then just a few seconds before broadcast, I was able to figure out what it was and connect. So, Rich, that's what happened.
All
Welcome,
right.
Rich.
Well,
Scheben.
it beats talking about cars.
Since you mentioned cars, and you did this time, but I just want, this is really kind of serious, and it'll only take me about a minute. So yesterday we were talking with Gwyneth about electric cars and how it's crazy to have an electric car, in my opinion, and hers. GM is recalling over 50,000 Chevy Bolts, B-O-L-T-S, that can catch fire when you charge them to nearly full capacity. So who would want to have an electric car and say, you know what, I'm not going to fill it up. I'm only going to charge it, part of the way. Well, what happens with these Chevrolet Bolts, and they probably have Chi-Com battery banks, well, when they get to 90% or over 90%, they seem to have the increased ability to catch on fire. Now, where do people charge their electric vehicles? Most of the time they charge them at their home. Where in their home? In their garage. So when these cars catch fire, where do they catch fire? In the garage. And how many garages are attached to the house or a part of the house? Almost all of them. So you can burn your house down with one of these electric vehicles. Chevrolet, General Motors, has issued a notice for 50,932 of these vehicles. But there are about 69,000 of these out there. 69,000. And if you charge them more than 90%, there's a great potential for a fire. But it's not just them. It's all of these guys. And so what's the fix? It's real simple. You bring your vehicle to your General Motors dealership, and they'll reprogram the charging system so that it won't charge over 90%. That's like having a leak in your gas tank and then the dealerships or the manufacturer saying, you know what, it only happens when you fill it up. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to lop off 10% of your gas tank, and that's going to fix the problem. That's what they're talking about doing. So if you have an electric vehicle, which I don't believe any of you do, but you may have a family member who does, and your family member may park it in your garage, if it's raining or something. Think about that. Do you really want that to happen? Do you want them, or what happens if you have one of those situations where you live in an apartment and you have like almost community parking, like that, one big roof over, let's say, 20 parking spaces, and the guy next to you has one of these electric vehicles and he's got his charger there. He plugs it in, and his vehicle catches on fire and burns all the other vehicles. How about that? So I just wanted to share that with you, Rich, only because you mentioned cars.
I just love it when I do that. And I'm there. I'll tell you something. Google, they're buying car dealerships. They just bought a dealership in Seattle just the other day. And basically, you could put this under the heading of consolidation of power, or surveillance, for tracking, they have the ability now in these new vehicles to literally stop you in their tracks and program your driving. I mean, this is very disconcerting. So, Vince, as you know, buddy, I got 16 hours worth of objective facts and evidence on voter fraud I want to talk about, and try to squeeze it into 2 hours. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to start repping it off.
Okay, as soon as I make one last comment. Class, we're not going to take calls today. And the reason is Rich actually, he has a lot to say. It's riveting information. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sit back and relax for almost all of the broadcast. I'll probably bring us in and out, but I'm very interested in what Rich Scheben has to say. This is the biggest theft in the history of the United States. That's what we're talking about. Rich, please
thank
continue.
you, Vince, and thank you, listeners. And I really feel that those of you who have listened to me for over 10 years, or almost 10 years on national radio, I like to talk about, I use financial, economic, social, and political rationale. I talk about political correctness. I talk about preparedness. I talk about ideas and solutions, off-grid living, animal husbandry, hunting and fishing, gardening, edible medicinal plants, science, health. I mean, it's not that I'm never going to discuss these things again, but I just think what's happening in America today with voter and election fraud is absolutely a time in history right now that will make or break America as we know it now. And I'm going to continue to use facts. I'm going to continue to use objective facts, evidence of voter fraud. I'm going to keep talking about all the things that I've discussed over the past several weeks, dead people voting in multiple states. I'm going to discuss witnesses, affidavits, pictures, articles, videos, or refer to it, whistleblowers, evidence of ballot stuffing, impossible math abnormalities, poll watchers being turned away, unsealed ballots, dirty voter rolls. And while I'm doing all this, I want you to think about, please, everything that's been going on regarding the agenda that we have discussed on this show in great detail. All the agenda of the virus, to eliminate Trump, create false austerity, crash the economy, delegitimize work, getting rid of cash and free markets and supply and demand, controlling everything via the technocracy, the social distancing to make us submissive to break our will, to eliminate legitimacy of voting, our Constitution, starvation, depopulation, free speech, Second Amendment, all the things that we talked about in great detail many times. I want you to think about the combat soldiers, over 1 million of them, who gave their life for our freedoms and liberties, where the left literally wants you to forget about your relatives who fought in the wars. I'm not just talking about the people who die. I'm talking about also Korea. I'm talking about Vietnam, not just World War I and World War II. I'm talking about the people who signed up and even didn't sign up because they got drafted, but they still showed up. I want you to think about all the suicide that's going through the roof, the drug use that's going through the roof, obesity that kills 40,000 people a month, all the units of measure of despairs, the business closures, the increase in murder, rape, looting, burning, all the general violence. And for those of you who know people who write off this as politics, it's not politics. When people say that, it's an excuse behavior for not being willing to see the forest through the trees, not being willing to read, research, and verify. And as we say on this show all the time, you should never, ever take one person's word for it. You have to read multiple venues. And especially the mainstream media, 99% of what they say is either propaganda, hoax, false flags, or lies. And that's especially including gaslighting. So that being said, I am going to just rattle off as much information as I can about the voter fraud, and then I'm going to do a tangent like I've been doing lately and talk about the outcome or consequences of political correctness, stupidness, and cowardice. Because we have to start saying the emperor has no clothes. It's just like, studies for climate change. The outcome is bought and paid for. You got to look at the subsidies, you got to look at the grants, you got to look at the favors, you got to look at the companies that benefit from certain legislation. And for those of you who may be Democrats who's listening to this show, you shouldn't be angry at Republicans. You should be angry at the too big to fail, the too big to jails. In other words, the powers that be who have rigged elections, votes, counts, and turned America into one big giant fraud. So that being said, here we go. I have so much, I almost don't know where to start. Now, there's a lot of talk. On Tuesday, I talked a lot about Dominion and Smartmatic and the voting machines and the software. There's basically 8 companies that are involved. And Bill Gates has been connected to these machines. And even Dominion admitted, now they don't admit to much, but they admit that the Clinton Foundation donations and Pelosi staffers are connected. And I want to quote, well, maybe it's a paraphrase, Hillary Clinton, talking about Joe Biden. Under no circumstances should Biden concede. Well, Hillary, we're going to take your advice. There's something we agree with what you said. And for all the people on the left and the mainstream media who keep gaslighting us with, there's no evidence. Well, we've given probably close to thousands of pieces of evidence at this point, and I'm going to continue to pile on through this show. Now, keep in mind the head of the FEC, the Federal Election Committee, agrees with widespread election fraud. So basically, what is probably going to happen, folks, and I don't have a crystal ball, but because of all this fraud, and it's in the rule of law, it's in the Constitution, all these swing states are going to be null and void. What's going to happen is there's going to be no certification. It's either going to go to the state legislature, the Supreme Court, and Congress will vote. And don't get nervous. Like I said last show, one vote, one state. One state, one vote. See, what we are proving here is that we are no longer a nation of laws. What's happened is everything's gone to the highest bidder or the highest threat, person who does the most threats. And I have to remind everybody, as per the rule of law and the Constitution, we, the people, should have the power. And we appreciate you being here, folks. We'll be right back after this break.
Class, Rich Scheben's with us, and it all boils down to 3 words. Crisis of confidence. We currently have a massive crisis of confidence. In what? In everything. In every corporation. In all the media. Even Chevrolet. Did you think that your Chevrolet Bolt would burn down your house? There's a crisis of confidence everywhere you look. Rich Scheben, I'm going to sit back and relax.
Well, thank you, Vince. Oh, Chevrolet Bolt burned down a house? Oh, well, they must be a racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent hater, anti-Islamist phobia. See, this is how stupid we have gotten, because we have allowed us to lower the bars of standards and expectations for work. We have allowed political correctness to be America's God. That's why I talked about I gave an analogy regarding the studies on climate change. The people who get the money for, whether it be COVID, whether it be climate change, it doesn't matter, whatever their agenda is, or whatever the tool they're using, I should say, to move their agenda, climate change, the people who get the money for these studies are the people who get subsidies, grants, favors, and companies that benefit from the legislation. In other words, it's known ahead of time that they have to create numbers, change facts, change definitions in order to make people, to fool people with the propaganda so the agenda moves forward, okay? You always hear the term follow the money, okay? And that's very analogous to a lot of these situations today. It's like the vote for the Democrats. It's not about accuracy. It's not about how accurate they are, how good they are, how benevolent they are. It's how much corruption they can hide in order to run out the clock on this deadline. Remember that paraphrase I've mentioned many times from Joseph Stalin. He doesn't care about who votes. He cares about who counts the votes. And that's what we're seeing. That's why all this recounting these illegal votes, it just hides the will of the people. We need forensic audits. We need to re-vote. And when I read articles, folks, sometimes it's 3, 4, 5, 6 pages long. Sometimes I'm listening to interviews that take an hour, and I'm literally gleaning 2 or 3 minutes of bullet points that are relevant from these articles and these interviews. What I'm doing is I'm studying probably 15 hours a day, and I am going to rattle off these bullet points from these articles and give enough information to keep the context of the voter and election fraud. And then, like I said, I will talk about the consequences, the outcome of political correctness, stupidness, and cowardness, which is unfortunately taking over too many people's minds in the form of brainwashing. Okay. That being said, in New Mexico, 180,000 ballots were corrupted from the lack of observers. President Trump, I want you to keep in mind, I'm going to, again, do objective facts. I'm going to do math. I'm going to do numbers. I'm going to use witnesses, affidavits. I'm going to talk about video evidence, ballot stuffing, impossible math abnormalities, poll watchers being turned away, unseen ballots, dirty voter rolls. I'm going to use all this stuff I've been using for weeks. I want you to remember that President Trump received over 10 million more votes than he received 4 years ago. In Michigan, the GOP board members only certified votes because of violent Democrat threats. And they're going after the children, they're doxing family members, they're threatening, they're being labeled as racists. And this is why I'm calling out AG Barr again. And I cannot tell you how old this is getting. It's amazing to me, whether it be the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, all these government workers getting paid huge dollars, huge benefit packages, huge pensions from us, and they're not doing their job. I'm telling you, William Barr, if you don't take that yellow stripe off your back and start doing your job, your family name will make Benedict Arnold look like a hero. We'll be back right after these messages, folks.
Fred Scheben's with us, and he's been talking about the big steal, the theft of the highest office in the land, the presidency of the United States of America. Rich, please continue.
Thank you, Vince. Now, did you hear the bottom of the hour news, folks, when they talked about legal process? Is that an oxymoron in America today? Holy smokes. They should call it the bought and paid for process. They talked about threats. They talked about how these people were threatened to change their vote. Now it's too late to rescind their vote. No signature correlation on the envelopes. My God, we are so corrupt. All right, I'm just going to continue bringing out more and more facts. Now, they're going to be articles, they're going to be bullet points. So I'm just going to say the next one. 1.8 million excess ghost voters in 353 counties across 29 states, plus blind mail-in ballots, no correlation to voter registration lists, erasing Trump votes, recounts will be fraud, because there's so many Trump votes that have been thrown away and that have been erased. Now, we have to remember, and pardon the repetition, there's witnesses, there's affidavits, there's videos, there's whistleblowers, there's evidence, there's impossible math abnormalities. There's so much evidence to back up the evidence. And just yesterday, Wisconsin was doing an emergency meeting to change objection rules. Now, this has been done in multiple states on the voting, and now it's being done on the counting. They're changing the rules in the last minute. That's what a lot of these states have done. They went in and changed the rules, changed the laws in order to allow a lot of the fraud. Let's just say it like it is. Next, a day after the election, Biden receives a dump of 143,000 plus votes at 3:42 a.m. when they learned he was losing extremely bad. This is unbelievable, folks. This is all evidence. I'm getting all these published articles and published bullet points from the public domain. A lot of it from Sidney Powell, a lot of it from whistleblowers. Now, keep in mind, I was on the air on Tuesday. I had to throw out almost 100 bullet points and articles because I do not have enough time to get through them all. I probably won't get through them all today, just with what I have left. Next, Massachusetts destroys over 1 million ballots in U.S. Senate primary race, committing Massachusetts election fraud. Attorney confirms ballot images used for counting votes must be saved as per federal law for 22 months, but they're nowhere to be found. Imagine that. Are you shocked, people? We are a third world banana republic. Next, this means the number of Biden votes in 10 of the outliner counties was 101%. Think about that kind of math, folks, of registered Democrat voters versus the majority of other Pennsylvania counties where it was, give or take, 70%. An extraordinary statistical difference. This is not logical or reasonable to be explained legally. The most likely explanation is that excess votes were added to the Biden total that did not come from voters. Next, I watched them pull out, this is basically text from a witness that signed affidavits. I'm going to mix all this stuff in here. Next, I watched them pull out a pile of what I observed to be absentee ballots and noticed two very distinct characteristics that these ballots had. One, I noticed that they all had perfect black bubble and were all Biden select. All Biden select. All Biden select. I was able to observe the perfect bubble for a few minutes while they made me move away from the table. At no time did I speak to the poll workers or obstruct them in any way. I heard them go through the stack and call out Biden's name over 500 times in a row. Next, all military and overseas ballots I reviewed were very clean. No bubbles colored outside the line. Not one ballot used an X or check mark. The ballots I reserved were marked in black ink were for Biden. Not one ballot had selection crossed out, change the vote selection. Next, I noticed Almost all the ballots I reviewed were for Biden. Many batches went 100% for Biden. Next, 2 charged with voter fraud allegedly submitted 8,000 fraudulent registration applications. Second, Georgia County finds thousands of votes with majority for Trump. Third, Georgia County finds memory card with uncounted votes, most for Trump. Now, folks, I'm going to do a little sidebar here because I realize that we can talk about each one of these articles for an hour. We don't have the time. There's too much information. There's too much voter and election fraud, and I'm giving the bullet points so you can take this information, glean it, maybe re-listen to the broadcast, maybe you're writing down notes, maybe you can pass it on to other people. And maybe there are people like the Sidney Powells and the Giulianis who may not be aware of this information, that they can re-look this stuff up before it gets purged or edited from the mainstream media and the social media and the big tech giants. Next, we were limited to 1 monitor for every 10 counting tables, and we were kept some distance from the tables. There is no telling what we missed under these unreasonable restrictions. The miscounted batch had been signed off by 2 official counters. Now, I'm reading their quotes, so my English may not be as it should be, but I'm trying to be as accurate as possible. One of our monitors discovered a 9,600 vote error in DeKalb County hand count. I believe that's Georgia. DeKalb. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. One batch was labeled 10,700 plus votes for Biden and only 13 for Trump, an improbable margin even in DeKalb standards. The actual count for the batch was 1,081 for Biden and 13 for Trump. Wrap your head around these numbers, folks. Fraud, fraud, fraud. Next, Georgia recount worker with 20 years of experience handling ballots described an odd batch that stood out. Pristine sheets with no markings and 98% for Biden. Witness also, a Democrat saw perfect black marks on stacked ballots, 500 in a row, all for Biden. Witness who saw perfectly mark-in ballots with some batches, 100% for Biden, which appeared to have been printed rather than filled out by someone. Did you hear what I said? The 100% of these batches which appeared to have been printed rather than filled out. Next, a report reads, Dominion deleted 2.7 million Trump votes nationwide. Data analysis finds 221,000 Pennsylvania votes switched from President Trump to Biden. 941 Trump votes deleted. States using Dominion voting systems switched 435 votes from Trump to Biden. 435,000 votes from Trump to Biden. Floyd County, Georgia. Election board confirms the audit found 2,500 to 27 votes that were counted. At this time, we don't know what went wrong, says board member of Mulaney Conrad. I mean, they find votes and that weren't counted, and they don't know what went wrong. Okay. Russ Ramsland of Allied Security Operations had an interview with Lou Dobbs. Lou Dobbs is a patriot, despite the fact he's on Fox News. There's some good patriots still left there. Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Laura. I don't know if they fired Judge Janine. Maybe they brought her back. I'm not sure, but there's a handful left. Most have sold out. Okay, this Russ Ramsland interview. I'm going to quote some of the things that he says. Machines do not have the capability to count the mass votes for Biden in a reported time period. Quote, we have been out looking mostly at Michigan. We are beginning on turning our sights on Pennsylvania and Georgia. The things you find in Michigan are amazing. These are over 3,000 precincts where the presidential votes cast compared to the estimated voters from the Secretary of State is from 99% all the way to 350%. Those kind of numbers don't exist in the real world. Fraud, fraud, fraud. He continues to say, so where did all these votes coming from? And looking at that, we've gone back and looked at some of these huge vote dumps that were mostly Biden's. We call them spikes. We've gone back and traced the spikes. We've seen where they were cast primarily in 4 counties, where we looked at how long it would take to cast these votes. And we looked at the equipment that exists at all these locations by serial number. And the fact of the matter is we can't see any physical way possible for some of those votes to have been in those kinds of numbers because they just don't have the equipment that can produce in that kind of timing. Up to 400,000 votes are likely questionable. I'm going to read the last sentence again. Up to 400,000 votes are highly questionable. You see, what's happened, folks, is that President Trump won in such a landslide is that they tried to make up through the rigging of the landslide that came in from Trump. Whether they stopped voting, we saw the charts where the Biden's vote went through the roof in a small period of time. That's why I'm giving all this evidence, okay? Like I've been doing for weeks. In the Philippines, there was a television interview by a Mark Malik Brown. I want you to look him up. He's about as anti-Trump as you can get. He admits a licensing agreement between Smartmatic and Dominion. So when you hear all these people on the mainstream media saying there's no correlation, no continuity, no relationship between the two, they're lying. And I still hold that Trump is going to win over 400 actual election votes when this is all said and done, assuming our lawyers and judges and AGs and are not bought and paid for. We'll be right back, folks.
Class, Rich Scheben's been talking about the crisis of confidence here in the United States of America. It's ubiquitous everywhere you look. Rich, please continue.
Thank you, Vince. Okay, next, Dominion executive admits fixing election to ensure, quote, Trump's not gonna win. He's an anti-Trumper. He's a self-identified Antifa member. Eric Coomer, I talked about him on Tuesday and I believe the week before too. The current vice president of U.S. engineering at Dominion Voting System admitted on social media to rigging voting machines in order to prevent President Trump from winning. Can't make this stuff up, folks. Next, those of you who listened to a phone call from Jenny Beth Martin, it's basically, she called in and talked to Georgia officials about whether they were going to produce at the end of the so-called recount, election night numbers, or if the recount is going to have any validity. Basically, the long story, and this is, I've listened to it, okay? It's on the web. Officials told me, and this is coming from an official, that they will only certify election night numbers even if the numbers do not match. Vince, I think I even sent that to you, and we don't have time to get in more detail about this, but the question was which numbers are going to be certified. Basically, they're saying only the election night numbers. The official at Georgia was saying every county's being told to do this. We're not saying we can't say otherwise because we're being ordered to do that. That means the election count is fraud. Okay, It's fraud. It's all theater. Next, a New Jersey woman knew the 33 people who voted for her, and she lost 33 to 10. And she called and verified that the voting machine had switched her votes. You can't make this stuff up. Next, if you question bad vote totals from Detroit, you're a racist whose grandchildren will live in shame. Is a hell of a way to run an election. These are called threats, folks. A Democrat, Abraham Aish, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing his name correctly, from Wayne County, just threatened and doxed his fellow board member, Monica Palmer's children, announcing names of their schools after calling their mother racist. She changed her decision shortly afterwards. This is illegal. This is threats. This is Banana Republic. This is mafia. This is third world. This is unbelievable. Oh, boy. Despite all these people signing affidavits under oath, risking perjury, they're claiming eyewitnesses to 500 to 0 ballot dumps are not going to be believed. That just shows how corrupt we are. I got to keep moving on. Next article, Andrew Cuomo is getting a $25,000 pay raise in January as the country's highest paid governor. $250,000 a year, never mind every benefit in the book, after killing tens of thousands of old people in nursing homes and basically telling you how to live in tyranny. Unbelievable. Next article. 15,000 Nevada voters also voted outside of the state electoral college candidates claim. You can't make this stuff up, folks. I mean, the fraud, the substantial irregularities, the improprieties that occurred in the election, and they even admitted, the election officials in Nevada, that the system is highly susceptible to fraud and abuse. It's unbelievable. The lack of reliability of signatures, scanning machines. I mean, I can go on and on. I just don't have the time. Next article. Nancy Pelosi snuck $350 million for the 50 richest zip codes into COVID relief bill. You can't make this stuff up. Basically, the majority of this money is going to be used to bail out blue states that were already mismanaging their budgets and running up large unfunded pension programs before the pandemic. People, the little people is not going to have any purchasing power at all for their money. Next, I'm going to quote Sidney Powell on one of her interviews, and I'm going to try to do it as quickly as possible. Obviously, I'm only going to get the first paragraph. I've just gotten some stunning evidence from a first-hand witness, say a high-ranking military officer who was present when Smartmatic was designed in a way. I'm just going to read you some of these statements, if you don't mind, she told Fox Business Lou Dobbs, so I get them exactly right. You're not going to believe it, folks. Some of you might have read this, but we're so corrupt. There's so much election fraud. We'll be right back after this break.
The three words that we've been talking about during this broadcast are crisis of confidence. Top of the hour news. Apple just announced a $113 million settlement. 34 states sued Apple because Apple intentionally slowed down the performance of their phones, which made people say, I guess I need to buy a new phone. To spur sales, Apple released an update for their phones, which slowed down the phone's performance. The owners of the phones were led to slaughter. They were led to buy new phones. That's Apple, run by Homo Tim Cook. So, we're back to the crisis of confidence. It's like every news report, one more theft after another, of things that you thought you owned. theft of your property, increasing in taxes, misrepresentation, out and out lies everywhere, 360 degrees plus top and bottom. Rich Scheben, please continue.
What the reason why we're doing this, folks, is because America is being proven to be illegitimate. Everything is scripted, everything's planned, and everything is unsustainable. We're turning into a third world banana republic where favors and graft are basically precede rules of law. Everything is on the chopping block right now. When you delegitimize America, everything's on the chopping block because basically it shows that everything's been sold out to the highest bidder or the biggest threat. So whether it be elections, voting, FBI, DOJ, all intelligence agencies, rule of law, courts, lawyers, judges, work, science, healthcare, math, history's being rewritten, rules, laws, accountability basically only pertain to a certain measure of what victim group or protectionist group status you have, wealth, success, economics, currency, money, commerce, prosperity, the middle class. Everything is getting under the category of FUBAR. And the direction that we're heading into is inevitable. We're heading into an authoritarian, tyrannical, and when I say tyranny, it's even medical tyranny with vaccinations, masks, a totalitarian communist insurrection takeover. They're going to say it's all for the good of the people, but that's not what it's about at all. So I want to go back to what Sidney Powell was saying about one of her many witnesses, and from what I understand, there's affidavits and witnesses and whistleblowers coming forth by the hundreds because the people are sick and tired of what's going on. They're tired of the corruption. They're tired of the manipulation. They're tired of the lack of rule of law. They're tired of it all. So this was about, I mentioned, I proceeded with a Smartmatic design, what this person was talking about. So I'm going to quote her who quoted him. Okay, so I also get that exactly right. From the affidavit, designed in a way the system could change the vote of each voter without being detected, he wanted the software itself to function in such a manner that if the voter were to place their thumbprint or fingerprint on a scanner, then the thumbprint would be tied to a record of the voter's name and identity as having voter. It should say voting, but the voter would not be tracked to the changed vote. He made it clear that the system would have to be set up to not leave any evidence to the changed vote for a specific voter, and that there would be no evidence to show or contradict the name or thumbprint was going with a changed vote. Smartmatic agreed to create such a system and produce the software and hardware to accomplish the goals of President Chavez. Man, we're turning into Venezuela, folks. According to the whistleblower, the Smartmatic voter system was implemented in Venezuela in 2006 when President Hugo Chavez defeated Manuel Rosales by nearly 6 million votes. The creator allegedly observed multiple elections where manipulated results ended up creating landslide victories. The whistleblower claimed the Smartmatic system was used again in 2013 following Chavez's death, in which Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro came into power. The whistleblower stated votes could be moved from one candidate to another in real time through the Smartmatic software. Powell stated this took place in another Venezuelan election. Smartmatic systems were allegedly connected to the internet and fed directly to the control room. When those monitoring the live results allegedly realized Maduro would be defeated,
a decision was made to reboot the system. It took 2 hours. In the 2 hours it took for the country to get the system up and running again, the results were allegedly manipulated so Maduro would come out on top. You see, folks, nothing's real. Everything is fake. Everything is phony. So what I got to do now, I have so much information, I'm not going to get to it all. I'm just going to shortcut my shortcuts. And what I'm going to do is, I talked about, and I did this a few times, the last few times on the air, I want to talk about the outcomes and consequences of this political correct cowardness and stupidity that's going on in America. Okay? So, that being said, Biden gun control, first article, could top $34 billion. Do you remember when I was mentioning quotes and paraphrases from Democrats who were saying, well, only the rich will probably have guns because ammunition and permits and regulations will be too expensive? There you go. Next, China used secret microwave pulse weapon to cook Indian soldiers alive. I want you to think that if President Trump doesn't get his rightful due on winning this election, which we've proved fraud by the thousands now, this China will control the U.S. in every way, shape, or form, including social credit score, including all this non-Geneva connections, Nuremberg, anti-Nuremberg type weapons. Next, 4 sheriffs won't inverse Governor Cuomo's Thanksgiving cap. You 4 sheriffs need to come out publicly because you're heroes, and you need to get all the sheriffs in New York and all the sheriffs in the country saying the same thing. Next study, I paraphrased this Danish study before. Masks do little, if anything, to stop COVID. Okay? See, everything is being censored and surveilled and tracked and traced and edited and purged to come up with the narrative, to sway public opinion, to manufacture perception, pity, and guilt. It's designed to basically make you submissive, which breaks your will. It's designed to reward mediocrity. It's designed to turn America into the law of diminishing returns. Next article, Dutch police beg pedophile hunters to stop exposing pedophiles. Well, why do you think that is, folks? It's that way because look at all these people who went to Pedophile Island with Epstein. Where are their names? They said that their names were going to come out. Where are they? They're not coming out because they have money. They have power. Different set of rules, laws, and accountability for every different group. And I've probably given 10,000 examples over the almost 10 years I've been on the air. Next article, COVID rules for thee, but not for me. They have photos of California Governor Newsom's it's in quotes, outdoor French laundry party where there's no social distancing, no mask for the party elites. It's unbelievable. And there was California Medical Association execs there too. People. What obviously the rule of law does not pertain to them. For those of you who want the rule of law to pertain to everybody, you're going to have to go to their house. You're going to have to confiscate their homes and confiscate their wealth and their bank accounts and distribute it accordingly. Because we have a totalitarian, tyrannical, communist insurrection where nothing matters anymore. Everything is only dependent on what group you're in. Next, here's a video of Feinstein who demanded the mask mandate but gets caught inside the Capitol with no mask. Next, Hirono. Conservatives aren't censored by big tech because Media Matters says so. Now, I don't know if she is that stupid or she thinks the American people are that stupid. Maybe it's a combination. I don't know. Next article. New York Times says the Great Reset is a conspiracy theory, but on the same day the World Economic Forum celebrates it. You cannot make this stuff up. And as I always say with my disclaimers, these are published articles in the public domain. Next, Putin. I'm going to save that. That's a different context. Next, science and technology pathologist claims coronavirus is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on unsuspecting public. Next, Governor Kate Brown from Oregon is threatening jail time and fines for anybody who violates Thanksgiving restrictions. Hi, Hitler. Hi, Hitler. Hi, Hitler. Where's your papers? Hi, Hitler. Next, the shocking reason why Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine requires storage at 70 degrees below zero is because it contains nanotechnology components that have never been used in vaccines before. We've talked about this on this show. We've talked about this. Nanotechnologies, the heavy metals, you're going to be a walk-in antenna affected by 5G, and it's going to destroy your immune system. Next, Obama's oceanfront estate granted rare exception from Hawaii's environmental laws. See, people, it doesn't matter. It's all BS. All of it. They're flying around their private jets, but they want to tax us for our carbon footprint. It's all BS. It's about different rules, laws, accountability based on what victim group or protectionist group status you are in. That is it. That's what it boils down to. Next, masks actually increase COVID infection rates. Well, of course, you're walking around with a mobile petri dish, creating humidity and catching bacteria. Hypoxia lacks oxygen in your blood. Next, New York Attorney General warns about surge in revenge porn due to pandemic. That's because males have to film sex because they're being blamed for rape unjustifiably. Accepting this illegal, politically correct behavior, and then I'm going to go back to more voter and election fraud. So next article, parents sue school district for transgender lessons. Parents, I know the divorce rate's the highest it's ever been. I know marriage rate is the lowest it's ever been. But if you have the ability, you need to get your kids out of the public government school. It's social and political indoctrination, and it really is torture for the children because they're not being taught logic and common sense and math and science because everything is now being bought and paid for, or threats. You need to homeschool your children. Next, the UN announces biometric digital ID wallet. We can talk about this for 2 hours, but I don't have the time. Basically, everything that they know about you or can make up about you is going to be on this, including your health, if you've been vaccinated, the whole works. They're going to track you. They're going to know exactly where you are, what you say. They want to put chips in your brain. It's beyond 1984 Orwellian stuff. Next article, coronavirus vaccines contain aborted human fetal tissue. And yes, it's right on the label. Next article, University of Wisconsin declares large rock to be racists and votes for its removal. I know what you're thinking. I know you think I'm making some of these articles up. I promise you, I am not. They're all published in the public domain. Next article. A German doctor was raided by armed police during a live YouTube stream because he wasn't selling the proper narrative. This is what's coming, folks. Next article. Wayne County Election Board members rescind their votes, possibly decertifying results. Well, I'll tell you something right now. I'm reading articles where they were threatened. I'm reading articles where they rescinded their last vote. I'm reading articles where their last rescind they're saying it's too late. It's hard to find what is up to date or even legitimate anymore because it's just, I'm shaking my head. I've read these articles top to bottom, every one of them. and sometimes 3-4 times, and I still can't believe it. So I'm going to go back. We have less than half an hour left with commercials. I'm going to go back to more election and voter fraud. And pardon me, folks, I appreciate you sticking with me here. There's just so much information that's coming in hourly. And I just have to mention this to get the word out to the people, because the people are not getting the correct information from the mainstream media. Okay, next, we're going back to election and voter fraud. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announces COVID-19 pandemic an opportunity for the Great Reset. And when he was talking about the Great Reset, he's talking about everything: the voter fraud, the election fraud, the tracking, the tracing, the surveillance, the censorship. You can't go to work unless you're vaccinated. The depopulation, all of it. Next article. Project Veritas video inside the Georgia recount. 3 wrong counts in 3 minutes. I saw the video. Next article. Georgia audit finds 2,700 votes not uploaded, shaving Biden's lead by 449. Next article. Mathematical improbabilities. And basically what they're talking about, and oh gosh, I did an excerpt on that. I just got to find out where it is. Basically, it means that the number of votes that Biden got were over 100% on the Democrat side. So the excess votes were added to Joe Biden, and it did not come from the voters. That's basically what that means. We'll be right back after this break, folks.
Class, if your neighbor is a Jumpin' Joe the plagiarist Biden supporter, as you heard at the top, at the bottom of the hour news, Jumpin' Joe is in favor of a National Firearms Act, which looks like it will cost $200 per weapon, $200 per rifle for you to keep it. $200 per. That puts your neighbor who supported Jumpin' Joe the plagiarist at risk, because when people remember that Jumpin' Joe sign in the front yard, in those banners, and the theft that's going to happen next with the National Firearms Act, costing manufacturers of firearms $200 per, we really don't know exactly what he's got in mind, Jumpin' Joe, but there are people who are going to be absolutely frosted with this guy. And I think we need to have a law that says if a politician violates campaign promises, the penalty is execution. I think we need that. Sounds strong. So that way we can figure out what we're voting for if we decide to cast our opinion. Which I'd just like to read a quick email, just one paragraph. Hi, Vincent. I apologize. I could not call in for some time. I listen to shows every day. Rich's shows are amazing. The information that he provides, I cannot find anywhere. As you predicted, we are going down, and I wish we could come out of this, and I wish no bloodshed happens. But I remember you telling me in the first call, we cannot go to normal. At that time, I didn't believe you, but I do now. And I think there's a lot of bloodshed that's going to happen. And that's from Arjun. Thank you, Arjun. Rick, back to you. I'm just going to sit back and listen while you finish the rest of the broadcast. I don't want to take any more time away from you.
Okay, well, thank you, Vincent. I'm not going to get to even close to what I've prepared, but I'm going to keep racking up the election fraud evidence. Now, I'm sure you heard during the last commercial break about the Georgia officials who won't turn over the lists. That's because they're hiding illegal activity. This election should be null and void.
as I've mentioned, we need to decide if we want to live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, or the divided groups by and of fraud, because that's what our new name will be. The system is rigged. I mean, ballots, machine voting abnormalities, the whole improbabilities that with math, glitches, redating ballots, the process is fake. The government is now totally illegitimate. Freedoms and liberties are gone. You are subjects ruled by the very few elite that has bought and paid for the politicians, lawyers, judges, media, law enforcement, DOJ, FBI, intelligence agencies. Everything is gone. The official authority term is now an official bona fide joke. Now, before I start going into more evidence, I hear a lot of people saying, why is the left why do they have all this allegiance and loyalty? Why do they stick together? Why do they openly talk about depopulating us? Why do they have this open addiction of power, money, and control? Why do they censor and surveil us out in the open? They track and trace us out in the open, fraud out in the open. How come the right doesn't do this? Well, I've asked for self-sufficiency preparedness schools to give people ideas and solutions and have them relearn 19th century skills and dovetail them with 21st century technology. I've done shows where I've given hundreds of ideas and solutions. And who's sticking up for us? We don't even have rule of law because the right would rather buy 10,000 acres pieces of land and stick a bunker on it. They would rather buy a big yacht, buy an island so they can escape all this. But the left is sticking together. Why is this? Well, I'm not going to answer the why. I'm going to answer the who. President Donald Trump is sticking his neck out for us and America. He's putting his whole prosperity, his safety, and his family on the chopping block for us. So all these gazillionaires, when we ask where are the gazillionaires on the right, how come they're not sticking up for us? How come they're not helping us out? How come they're not creating schools for self-sufficiency and the hundreds of ideas and solutions that I've talked about over the years? But there's one person who is, and that's President Donald Trump. Is he perfect? Hell no. Am I perfect? Hell no. None of us are. We're all imperfect sinners. That's what makes us human. All right. That being said, I'm going to go back to more evidence of election fraud. Next, Maricopa used Dominion employees, not county workers, for the tabulation. So when people think that these people who are involved in the voting process is volunteers and not paid, you're totally wrong. There's exceptions to every rule, but we're so corrupt, so manipulative, so filled with so much fraud. Like I said, this whole election should be null and void because we are the laughing stock of the world right now. Next, all-powerful CDC calls for concentration camps in America, including of invasion of homes and neighborhoods. The CDC is a private organization. They're not even government. Wrap your head around that, folks. Next, California men charged with voter fraud after allegedly submitting thousands of applications for homeless people. Next, why are so many Dominion employees deleting their LinkedIn profiles? Is because they're hiding their guilt. They know they've done illegal activity, and they're keeping their profiles from the people because they're afraid of retribution. Because they know the lawyers and judges aren't going to go for them because they're involved. They're all bought and paid for. They're afraid of the people. Next, ABC hit piece on GSA transition official. Basically, they are threatening the GSA people, the people who should certify the votes. This is Banana Republic stuff. And listen, we wouldn't have all these threats and censorships and surveillance and tracking and tracing and and all this stuff, if this was legit, we wouldn't. Have you noticed every, and I'm using an absolute term here, every piece of evidence of voter and election fraud is done from the left, from the Democrat Party. Every. Next, Pennsylvania Supreme Court rules against the Trump campaign. You know why? Because the lawyers were being threatened. This is illegal. My God, I can't believe this is America. Next, Giuliani vows Trump will contest voter fraud vigorously in courts as he announces 100,000 phony ballots from Biden dumped in Michigan. And it's unbelievable. And we have an open Nazi as governor of Michigan. Oh, unbelievable. Next, Dominion story keeps getting worse. Ties to Clinton Foundation and Nancy Pelosi, and the security chief is Antifa and Trump hater. Wikipedia protects them by censoring most of their history. Next, second memory card with 2,700 plus votes found during Georgia election audit, decreasing Biden lead. Next, a Pennsylvania Supreme Court rejects Trump argument. Observers just have to remain in the room, even though they're being kicked out, even though they're being threatened and intimidated, even though the cops are on their side, even though they're putting barriers up, even though they're moving the voting machines back, even though they're in a stadium. You can't make this crap up. Next, Edward Snowden posts video showing how simple it is to hack voting machines used in swing states. We've seen videos where this one woman was doing it in 2 minutes. It's all a joke. Next, Milwaukee vote dump at 4:30 a.m. on live TV left Chris Cuomo speechless. If you have not seen this video, look it up. I was able to look at this and enlarge the picture. Donald Trump's vote went down instantaneously while Joe Biden's vote went up. How do you lose votes? You don't lose votes. It's fraud. It's fraud. Next, Senator Blumenthal straight up asked Zuckerberg to take down Steve Bannon's account. One thing I'll say about Steve Bannon, I think he's a patriot, and I think he's extremely intelligent, and I've watched his show. You can pick up his show on citizenfreepress.com. They will put his show on live, and what I like about it is that you can fast forward through the commercials, if you will, and get to the meat and potatoes. He has good information and good guests. Next, Dominion Tech's not allowed to comment on the 2,700 found votes in Floyd County. They're not allowed to comment. They get caught. They're not allowed to comment. You can't make this stuff up. Okay, second, Georgia County Fayette suddenly finds 1,000 more votes, majority for Trump. Next, third, Georgia County finds missing votes. Next, I'm shortcutting my shortcuts. Next, Michigan Secretary of State says we'll look into Wayne County audit request. Yeah, I got to see it to believe it. All 50 states should be audited, and especially forensically audited, throwing out the Trump votes. My God, this is unbelievable. Okay, next, Republican caves after threats. How can this election be legitimate when all these threats and doxing and threatening people's children? How can this be? How is this possible? This should be null and void. We're in a real, folks, take your U.S. flag and tape with duct tape a banana to the flag. We are an official banana republic. Next, Wayne County canvassers agree to certify election results after deadlocking in 2-2 vote. Well, let's see what happens. Next, Wayne County leftist Ned Stabler threatens GOP canvassers on video. You cannot make this stuff up. Next, 9,600 plus vote errors found in Georgia hand recount. Now, folks, keep in mind, These hand recounts are designed to recount the same counts. And for those of you who've been listening to alternative media, listening to this show over the past few weeks, look at how many votes they found and errors they found, all the voting abnormalities they found, and yet the Republicans are still picking up votes. I'm telling you right now, not only did Donald Trump legitimately win with over 400 electoral votes, this Congress...
Rich, I just want to tell you that as I'm listening to you, I have never heard anyone in broadcasting ever in my entire life deliver so much information so succinctly, so quickly, so accurately, so on point as you have in the last 2 hours. And you've been doing it week after week after week and for years. So I just want to tell you, thank you so much for what you do. And class, it takes a lot of effort to do what Rich is doing. And when he says he researches 15 hours a day, he's not kidding. And you now hear the proof of it. Rich, I'm going to just sit back and listen.
Well, thank you, Vince. And I just feel, I appreciate the kind words, and I just feel that as an American, it's our obligation and duty to be doing this. We all have to do our part. We cannot any longer accept the silent majority, because everything is at stake. One of the reasons I wrote the book is because I see these unitive measures of despair in America increasing. I see where, like I mentioned earlier, where the powers that be are literally making America illegitimate. And when we can't change our destiny through hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications, when the rule of law is gone, when transparency is gone, when we no longer have rights, restitution, or protection under the rule of law, when college degrees, SAT scores, opportunity, everything becomes illegitimate, voting. You see drug use going through the roof, hate hoaxes going through the roof. Now they want to force inoculations on us. GMO foods are getting worse with nutrition. They want to inject us with nanotechnology, which will make us human antennas around 5G. We're not going to be able to protect ourselves with gun or free speech. Suicides going through the roof. They're literally openly coming out with depopulation efforts. Openly harvesting late-term abortion baby organs so the wealthy can use them. Pedophilia is adult. Let me put it this way: adult mutual consensual sex is now off the table. Life expectancy is dropping like a rock, and you see the people who are benefiting are the tattletales, the snitchers, and we see more masks and lockdowns controlling the people. We're entering a permanent caste system where nothing will matter, nothing will ever matter again, because there's nothing else you can do about it. And you'll be called a conspiracy theorist, and this is why I am doing this. It's for the people. It's for America. Okay, I'm going to go to the next article. Zuckerberg, one of Vince's favorite people, was funding a safe elections project and announces grants for the Senate runoff elections. Remember when I said earlier in the show about certain studies? I gave an example of climate change. Well, these grants, subsidies, favors certain companies that benefit from legislation. The outcome is already bought and paid for. That's why these people are doing this. We have to be aware of all these things, and we have to say them out loud. Next article. Election security expert finds Wisconsin results a complete fraud. Let me say that again. Elections security expert finds Wisconsin results a complete fraud. This is what the Democrats and the left are doing. They're making America a complete fraud. Next, OAN
a great news reporting agency, OAN, reports data recovered from Skittle. Remember I talked about that on Tuesday in great detail, the company in Spain going bankrupt, which would give Trump 410 electoral votes. Remember how I've been saying for a few weeks now that Trump won over 400 electoral votes? And the landslide was so great, they kept coming in with all these different gimmicks and recounts and ballots and all this stuff, but there was so much for Trump, they got caught. Okay? They got caught. The CIA got caught. All these people got caught. Next article. Nevada Electoral College members file election contest claiming widespread election fraud. This is the Nevada Electoral College members are filing election contest claiming widespread election fraud. Next article. Biden underperformed Hillary Clinton nationwide except in 4 cities. That's a statistical impossibility. The Democrats, including Elizabeth Warren, warned about Dominion's switching votes. Arizona, unlikely to see accurate vote counts. The Secretary of State thinks Trump supporters are neo-Nazis. Jim Jordan in Congress says we should investigate the whole 2020 election. I agree. We need everybody to be a Jim Jordan and a Rand Paul. We thank you for being here.